This is Roger Deakins and Steven Soderbergh talking about making, well, they didn't make it, but they're talking about Chinatown.
Chinatown, it just flows in it's almost a mechanical way. I mean, the way it's built and put together, it's just absolutely seamless. And it's all supremely calculated, but you're not aware of it. You know, it's just like this inevitable flow towards doom, I suppose.
And this is Required Watching, where we watch the essential films from a list of cinematic influencers and look at them through the lens of learning about filmmaking and how to move forward. I'm your host Trey Epps, and today we're talking about a movie about a private detective hired to expose an adulterer in 1930s Los Angeles, who finds himself caught up in a web of deceit, corruption, and murder. This was directed by Roman Polanski, written by Robert Towne, starring Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway, John Huston, and honestly, a whole bunch of other people. Forget it, guys. This movie is Chinatown. Oh, that was so bad.
I goddamn near lost my nose, and I like it. I like breathing through it. And I still think that you're hiding something.
She's my daughter.
I said I want the truth.
She's my sister.
Evelyn, put that gun away. Let the police handle this.
He owns the police!
Okay, so I haven't seen Chinatown ever. People talk about it all the time. I mean, I was shocked to see that it was in color. I don't know what movie I thought it was, but it wasn't that. If you read any screenplay book, you know Chinatown comes up quite a bit. And I kind of felt tired of essentially knowing and analyzing the movie I haven't ever seen, and I guess knew about and read about and knew all the story points, but haven't seen it all. Admittedly, people love this movie. It's on all sorts of lists, but for me, after reading the movie, I also left it. I remember Saturday morning cartoons or cartoons that would kind of parody, these kinds of movies, these like noirs, and I loved it then, and I kind of love it now. I think I was a bit worried about it coming off really stale, but it didn't. It didn't at all. Um, Listen, I love Chinatown. It had a lot of twisty turns that may not seem so crazy, but once we got to the climax, I was like, oh no, where is this movie going? I knew the ending, and I was still shocked. That of course is because of the performances, and I think the vulnerability that Jack Nicholson plays for Jake. I like I like to use the phrase "save the cat" ironically when talking about writing films, but this is maybe the first time that I've actively looked at a protagonist do something and was like, "Yeah, I'm on his side now." Like that was a save the cat moment. I've watched a lot of movies, I've studied a lot of film, and that has never happened. I'm talking about the very beginning when Jake Gittes, Jack Nicholson's character, is very sympathetic to his clients, and I think I think he was like, no, I won't take your money, I don't want to put you out or that kind of thing, and he's very much about his honor, not necessarily about destroying people's lives, and I think that was admirable. And I'm not sure if like private eyes usually get a reputation of being like in the movie being a private eye was disgusting or low life kind of job, but I'm not sure how much that actually held true in 1930s, but it was great to see that he was like, no, like I'm trying to help people even if it is under these circumstances. But what were your thoughts when you seen this movie? Did you read this movie? Did you read about this movie? Have you heard of this movie before? I don't think it's a deep cut. It is one of these like classics, but I just feel like people don't talk about it. People write about it, people don't talk about it, but whatever. Let's move on to some fun facts, folks. The screenplay didn't have any scenes actually set in Chinatown, which I think is hilarious. I think when Robert Towne originally wrote it, he wanted it to be like a metaphorical place, like a metaphorical kind of place in the mind of Jack Gittes. And it wasn't until Roman Polanski came along that the screenplay went through a lot of rewrites. There's so many stories about what the first few drafts had in it that didn't make it to the final film, which I think are incredibly interesting. So if you're interested in that, please do some research on that because the story is incredible. Um, Robert Town was also known as a really good writer, and he went uncredited on some rewrites that he'd done for other studios, and turned down nearly $200,000 to adapt The Great Gatsby, and took $25,000 to write Chinatown instead. He'd been quoted as saying something like he didn't want to be the person to ruin a classic book. And who was it? Oh man, I forgot who it was. Someone else ended up adapting Great Gatsby, and it was not great. um, I'm really trying to figure out when they're gonna make a really good Great Gatsby. I wonder if maybe it's one of those films that can only stay in the book, which is both sad and depressing, but also comforting as a writer. I think to know that some things just can't be adapted and shouldn't be adapted. And no matter how many times you try to adapt something, it's never going to come across great. Neither here nor there. Noah Cross consistently mispronouncing Jake Gittes's name was not a choice. It was a mistake. Noah Cross would mistakenly say Gitz, which for his character being this rich pompous jerk is insulting. It's insulting when someone mispronounces your name, but uh, felt right for the character itself. And on the day they added a couple lines about when Jack Nicholson's character was like, no, it's Gittes, not Gitz. And then they just stopped correcting it, and they just went on and went on, and it lent to a layer of his character that I don't know. I think it really added a layer to the character. Like I appreciate the fact that they let him go on with this, and whether or not he can remember or not, whatever the situation was, uh, yeah, it really added some value, I think, to the character, to the family, and to all this that that Mrs. Mulray grew up in because of this. Very very interesting. But am I being too nerdy about like character choices? Um, in terms of scene stealers, I didn't have one. I didn't have a very clear cut scene stealer. I think I was really enthralled with the kind of movie that was being made. Um, it felt very much in this golden era of like movies of these times of the 50s, 60s, and all that stuff. And and yet something about it felt really fresh, and my eyes were peeled open the entire time. So there's nothing. I think the movie itself kind of stood out for me for the texture that it brought in comparison to some of the other movies I've been watching lately. Now, is this movie required? Okay, is this movie required? I think this is one for the writers here. There's a reason Chinatown is a legendary script, from the first draft to collaboration with Robert Town and Polanski to getting to the final draft. As I mentioned, I think it's worth watching to know where the story was going to go and where it ended up being is interesting, especially for this time frame, especially when um, directors often work with their writers, but I think having this collaboration, and I won't speak much about Polanski, but having this collaboration as a writer with your director and your director with your writer is important. Important to be able to share your story and allow your director to help mold it in a way that is satisfactory to the both of you. And I think Chinatown could have been a very different story, and because of that collaboration, it ended up being something that again is a classic and is talked about over and over and over again. Um, I also think Jack Nicholson running around town was great. I think uh him not being much of like a macho man, like a manly man, is like, of this time is really interesting and really fun to play with. Like this vulnerability, I don't think like like masculine vulnerability is never really accepted. Yeah, I'll make that blanket statement of it not being accepted. But I think especially around now, showing this like I want to be an honorable person, I'm wearing suits all the time is I don't know, is something that I don't think is like in the world of LA at this time. I don't think like it makes you a punk, it makes you a fool, it makes you someone who can get taken for a ride. But I think Jack Nicholson brings that perfect amount of like I will still clock you in the face as well as like do the right thing. Is is I think great, and that comes down to the writing, but also the acting that Jack Nicholson brings to it. Again, I talked about this. I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately, actually, about like how legendary actors, iconic actors, are known for their one role, but when you get to see them outside of a few things, especially when they're a bit younger, you get to see how they built up their status as being um, as being this legendary iconic actor. It's not that one movie that broke them off. It actually is like this whole slot of work that they've done to really build up their reputation. I mean, this could have been Jack Nicholson's first movie. I honestly don't know, but um, Jack Nicholson in this movie and Jack Nicholson in, like, I don't know, like whatever his last movie are two different actors, and I think it's important to be able to go on the timeline to figure out like what makes an actor tick. Um, but maybe I'm being far too nerdy about this. Listen, this is the end of it. If you enjoyed listening, if you enjoyed watching, please subscribe, download, give us reviews, share a share a comment or so, and we'll read it. We'll read it out. 2022 is so close. It's so close, and we'll be changing things up a lot. So please stick around. Thank you so much for listening and watching at the moment. It's been a pleasure. So as always, required watching is a film club. So stick around, have your say, share something. Until next time, folks. Peace.